All right, let's dive in. Today we're exploring migration. Big topic, right?
Huge.
And we've got some interesting perspectives to unpack.
Yeah.
Our source material is a conversation between Lucienne, she's a 19-year-old scientist from France.
Wow, 19.
I know, right? Super impressive. And Mitt, he's a 38-year-old investor from Russia.
Interesting combo.
They really get into it, debating all sorts of angles, like what if, poof, all visas just disappeared?
No more visas, that's a big what if.
Totally. And then they go even further. What about a world without any borders at all?
Now that's getting philosophical.
It is. For this deep dive, we're going to focus on Lucienne's side of the conversation.
All right, so what's her take?
Well, she's all about the power of legal migration.
Makes sense for a scientist, right?
Exactly. She sees it as essential for global development, especially when it comes to science and innovation. You know, sharing ideas, collaborating across borders.
Like a global brain trust?
Yeah, and she's got a great point. I mean, think about it. For any system to thrive, you need rules.
Structure, guidelines, definitely. Otherwise, it's just chaos.
Exactly. And the same goes for migration. She argues that well-defined procedures help ensure everything runs smoothly, fairly, and safely for both the migrants themselves and the folks in the host countries.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Openness, but with clear boundaries.
Exactly. And she actually brings up a super relevant example, her own experience working on that massive International Collider project.
Yeah, the one where they smash particles together.
That's the one. She says that project wouldn't have been possible without scientists coming together from all over the globe.
True. That level of collaboration is incredible. Makes you think, what could your field achieve with even more global talent exchange?
Right. It's a question worth pondering. But while Lucienne is totally for legal migration, she doesn't shy away from the more difficult aspects.
Like what?
Well, illegal migration, for one.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is. But, you know, she approaches it like a true scientist. She's less interested in just treating the symptoms and way more focused on tackling the root causes.
Getting to the heart of the matter.
She even says that just focusing on border security is kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So what does she say needs to happen instead?
Well, she really emphasizes the importance of addressing things like poverty and conflict.
The underlying issues that drive people to migrate in the first place.
Exactly. And that's where effective management comes into play.
Finding solutions that are both, well, how do you say it? Compassionate, 80 practical.
Right. Striking that balance is key. It makes you think, what responsibilities do developed nations have in all of this?
It's a big question.
It is. And speaking of big questions, Lucienne and Mitt also go deep on the idea of a world without ANY borders, like completely borderless.
Now that's a wild thought. No countries, just one big planet.
Yeah, it's pretty utopian, right?
Sounds kind of nice at first, but I bet there are tons of complications.
Oh, tons. And Lucienne doesn't sugarcoat any of them. But she does start by acknowledging, you know, the appeal.
The dream of free movement, no more passports, cultural exchange galore.
Exactly. And maybe even less conflict because those dividing lines are gone. But then she brings in the reality check.
What kind of reality check?
Well, for starters, think about economic disparities.
Yeah, if people can move freely, wouldn't everyone just flock to the wealthiest places?
That's a big concern she raises. And it's not just economics. Cultural differences could clash.
Right. Not everyone wants the same things or lives the same way.
Exactly. And then there are the security concerns.
Like, how do you even police a borderless world?
It's a massive challenge. But then they throw out the most mind-blowing question.
What's that?
What if we abolished all visas right now? Like today?
Okay, now that's a deep dive.
Lucienne gets super analytical here. She breaks down the potential consequences, both the good and the bad, and the immediate impact. Total chaos.
I can imagine.
Think transportation systems completely overwhelmed.
Planes, trains, automobiles, all packed to the brim.
Exactly. And migration flows all over the place.
People going everywhere, no clear direction.
It'd be a logistical nightmare. Not to mention the potential for illegal activity skyrocketing.
People taking advantage of the situation.
She even talks about the potential for, like, a global economic shock.
Yikes. So lots of downsides at first. But what about the long term? Does she see any positives coming out of this hypothetical visa-free world?
Oh, yeah, definitely. She thinks it could actually lead to some really positive changes.
Like what?
Well, she uses this phrase, economic rebalancing. Basically, she thinks people would naturally move to where their skills are most valuable, which could lead to incredible economic growth in unexpected places.
Interesting. So like a global reshuffling of talent and resources.
Exactly. But it's not just about money, right? It's about culture, too. Imagine the incredible blending of cultures that could happen.
Yeah, a true melting pot on a global scale.
It'd change the way we think about citizenship and national identity.
Those lines would get pretty blurry, wouldn't they?
Totally. But here's the catch. To manage this new world, we'd need entirely new international structures, like global social security systems, standardized healthcare protocols, the whole shebang.
Whoa, that's a massive undertaking. It's like starting from scratch.
It would be. So yeah, lots to consider, right?
My brain's already doing backflips. I can't wait to dig deeper into this in the next part.
Me too. It's a fascinating conversation. We'll be right back after the break.
See you soon.
Welcome back. It's kind of crazy to think about what would actually happen if we just, suddenly got rid of all visas.
Right, like imagine booking a flight to, I don't know, Brazil tomorrow and just...
No paperwork, no embassy visit, just pack your bags and go.
It's tempting, right? That freedom to just explore wherever you want. But Lucienne, she brings up a really good point. It wouldn't just be about individual freedom. There would be some serious consequences on a global scale.
Yeah, it's like suddenly everyone's playing musical chairs, but with countries. Exactly. And there aren't enough chairs. She even uses this phrase, the Great Migration, to describe what would happen.
The Great Migration, huh? Sounds kind of ominous.
It is. She paints a picture of absolute chaos. Think airports operating way beyond capacity.
Like people sleeping on the floor, lines out the door.
Worse. She actually quotes the study that modeled this mass movement of people, and it predicts a total breakdown of transportation systems. Like planes grounded, trains delayed, highways completely gridlocked.
Oh, wow, that's intense.
It'd be a logistical nightmare. And remember, it's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's about what happens when people arrive.
Yeah, like where do they stay? What about healthcare?
Exactly. Imagine hospitals overwhelmed, housing markets going haywire, even schools struggling to keep up with a sudden influx of new students. And it wouldn't be evenly distributed, right? Some places would be hit way harder than others.
Right, everyone would be trying to get to the best places.
Yeah. The places with the most opportunity, the highest standard of living. And that's where things could get really dicey. She even mentions the potential for increased social unrest and even conflict, especially in places that are already struggling.
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't even considered that.
It's easy to get swept up in the idealism, right? But she makes a really important point. Even with the best of intentions, a sudden shift like this could have some pretty devastating consequences.
It's a reminder that change, even positive change, needs to be managed carefully.
Right. You can't just flip a switch and expect everything to work out perfectly. But Lucienne isn't just about doom and gloom, you know? She does acknowledge that there could be some really significant long-term benefits to this whole visa-free scenario.
Okay, I'm curious. What kind of benefits is she talking about?
Well, she uses this phrase, economic rebalancing. It's this idea that when people are free to move wherever they want, they'll naturally gravitate towards places where their skills are most needed and valued, which could lead to this huge surge in economic growth, maybe even in places that have been struggling.
That's interesting. So instead of everyone flocking to the already wealthy places, talent and resources would spread out more evenly.
Exactly. It's like this global redistribution of opportunity. Imagine a brilliant engineer from, I don't know, rural India suddenly having the chance to work on cutting-edge tech in Silicon Valley. Or a doctor with specialized knowledge being able to provide care in a remote village in Africa that desperately needs it.
That's a pretty powerful image. It's
Right.
like suddenly your birthplace doesn't determine your destiny anymore.
Right. It becomes about your skills and ambition, not just where you happen to be from. And she argues that this kind of free movement could lead to incredible innovation and economic growth on a global scale. Think about all the untapped potential that could be unleashed.
It's almost like hitting the reset button on the global economy.
Exactly. But even with all these potential benefits, she's realistic. She knows it wouldn't be easy. She talks about the need for a total overhaul of our current systems. We'd need new global institutions to manage this new era of interconnectedness.
It's like the UN, but on steroids.
Right. She specifically mentions the need for a global social security system to ensure that everyone, no matter where they live or work, has a basic safety net. And imagine trying to develop standardized healthcare protocols and educational systems that work for such a diverse global population. It would be an enormous undertaking.
Definitely not a task for the faint of heart.
Not at all. But she seems to believe that this initial chaos, this great migration, could actually be the catalyst for creating something truly remarkable. Like it would force us to confront these global challenges head on and come up with innovative solutions that we might never have considered otherwise.
It's kind of like you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, the omelet is a more equitable and interconnected world.
Exactly. And that's what makes this conversation so thought-provoking, right? It's not just about the pros and cons of a visa-free world. It's about asking ourselves, what kind of world do we want to create? What principles should guide us? What sacrifices are we willing to make?
It's a lot to wrap your head around. But it's definitely a conversation worth having. And I'm really excited to see where Lucienne takes us next. This is getting good.
Welcome back. It's amazing how Lucienne manages to, balance this big picture thinking with these really practical considerations. It's not just utopian dreaming. She's got a plan, you know?
Well, more like guiding principles, right? It's not a step-by-step roadmap, but definitely some key ideas to consider.
Yeah. And for her, it really boils down to this idea of equitable access to opportunity. Like, no matter where you're born, you should have a fair shot at reaching your full potential.
Makes sense. A level playing field globally.
But how do you actually make that happen? Like, how do you translate that into concrete policies?
Well, one thing she emphasizes is a strong social safety net. And not just on a national level, but global.
Global. So, everyone contributes to this giant fund that supports folks no matter where they are.
Exactly. Provides basic income, healthcare, education. A safety net for everyone.
Whoa. That's a huge shift from how we think about things now. It's almost like redefining citizenship, making it less about borders and more about, being human.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical idea. But think about it. In a borderless world, those traditional systems wouldn't really work anymore, would they?
True. So social safety net, check. What else?
Global governance, that's a big one.
How do you even enforce laws and regulations when everyone's moving around freely?
It's tricky. She uses the internet as an analogy. It's this global network with its own rules and protocols. Not perfect, but it kind of works.
Right. It shows that global governance is possible. But the internet also has a ton of problems like cybercrime, misinformation, digital divides. How do we prevent that stuff from happening in a borderless world?
Good point. She acknowledges those challenges. For her, it's about constant dialogue, collaboration, being willing to adapt and learn from mistakes. It's an ongoing process, not a one-time fix.
So it's less about having all the answers right now and more about being open to finding them together as we go.
Exactly. It's about embracing the unknown, being willing to experiment, and always striving for a more just and equitable world.
That's pretty inspiring, actually. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a mix of, excitement and apprehension. It's a lot to process.
I get it. It's a mind-bending topic.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of it, right? It challenges us to think differently, to imagine new possibilities.
And those possibilities, they're not just theoretical anymore. They have real implications for the world we're creating.
Absolutely. So keep those conversations going. Keep asking questions. Keep exploring.
Because the choices we make today, they matter. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, stay curious.
And open-minded.